Okay, time for another Dicktales from the toilet. Now we're talking about fire here, but I may start with this little bit down here first of all. It talks about from the study soil we have found that found in the Dicktales region. It can be stated that these plants are usually found on a medium to fine sandy soil containing some organic matter, either incorporated as humus in a manner similar to grasslands or as an accumulation of peat. Now, first of all, it says medium to fine sandy soil. Now, why is that important? Well, most of the scientific papers that I've read on the actual Atlantic coastal plain talk about the sand being quite large, almost getting up to grit size sort of thing. Now, grit is usually like 1 to 2 mil sort of thing. It's basically 1,000 times bigger than clay, because clay is 1 to 2 microns. So you go from like 1 to 2 microns all the way up to 1 to 2 millimeters sort of thing. And in between those you have your silt and your sand. So between your 1 to 2 microns all the way up to 100 microns you have your silt, and from beyond 100 microns you basically have some sort of sand. You have fine sand, you have medium grain sand, and coarse sand sort of thing. And then after that you get your grit, which is your 1 to 2 mil basically. So anything bigger than 100 microns and smaller than 1 mil is your sand basically. And then that sand is then divided up into basically fine, medium and coarse sort of thing. You know, basically coarse sand is anything over 1/2 mil basically, to a certain degree or extent. But what I'm saying is most of the scientific papers are saying that the sand is coarser generally in the Atlantic coastal plain than at these Dicktales sites. And then that brings into the question the idea of all this perlite, putting all this perlite into your peat because you want to aerate the medium. And I'm thinking, well, out in the real world where they actually grow, they grow in a specific size range of sand on the Atlantic coastal plain, which is different to the generalized size of the sand that most of the scientific papers talk about when they just talk about the Atlantic coastal plain in general. So this idea that you have to have them aerated and all that just goes against what is out in the real world again. So we have plants which go dormant in the summer, grow continually through the winter, which is not how we've been taught or experience in cultivation sort of thing. They flower less in the wild than they do in cultivation. Like in cultivation, most of them flower. You know, if you've got a mature Dicktales, every year almost all the mature ones will send up a flower stalk. Not true in the wild. Okay, and we'll probably get to the percentages later on when we get to the other parts of the paper. What else is different? Basically growing in a mineral soil. They have a hard pan, which is different to the normal podzolic hard pan. It's not the same as the general podzolic hard pan. Another difference there. All these slight subtle differences out in the real world, the data that's been collected by these people, and I don't think there are too many other people out there. There's the Pietro Paulo thing, but that's basically just a restatement of this paper in a slimmer, more succinct, more precise, more precise form. I don't know if you could call it that. But anyway, then we got this thing to do with fire. Burning plays an important role in the development of the sandy soils of the Atlantic coastal plain, and thus in the ecology of Dicktales. Although fire does not reach an intensity great enough to ignite subsurface organic matter, but then again, they imply here that it's really inorganic soil, basically. It doesn't. Most of the time it doesn't have a surface horizon. It's either been burnt off or it's been washed away. Yes, so again, different. It is strong enough to burn off partially any surface detritus and thus aid in its further decomposition. Well, if it's been burnt off, it's not organic. It's been turned into an inorganic form. Okay, that's a subtle point there. Do you get it? Charcoal or ash is now organic matter that's been converted into, in quotes, inorganic form. Pure carbon, to a certain extent, if you assume that charcoal is pure carbon, it's not, it's got other stuff in it, but it's basically pure carbon. There are different forms of charcoal. There's the lady from the DNA thing, Rosalind. She did some wonderful papers on charcoal. It's not all the same. Okay, you might want to look those up. Okay, the usual type of fire in the southeast is short-lived on any areas and passes over the ground rapidly, burning most of the low vegetation in its path, but without heating the subsurface soil very greatly. Below 1 inch, or 2.54 centimeters roughly, very little or no change in temperature can be detected. So it doesn't even damage the bulbs, or corms or tubers, rhizomes, whatever you want to. Most areas where diarrhea is found are burned fairly frequently, and thus an A0 or horizon is almost completely lacking. So that's another point. So all this sphagnum and a little bit of humus on the surface, if it's regularly burnt, which is a natural occurrence pre-man sort of thing, there isn't much sphagnum or surface detritus on the surface of the soil. It's all been converted to charcoal and ash, which then leads into the question: what is ash and why is it so alkaline? Which I keep banging on about. I keep banging my hand on the table, and no one seems to want to put up their answer and answer that question. Okay, the resulting sparse ground cover is frequently burnt in burned areas. Permits rain to wash the surface layers clean, leaving a pure white sand, but beneath the sand is a dark grey. Hang on, they spelt the word grey differently, haven't they? That's the personal grey. G-A-Y, not G-R-E-Y. They've made a spelling mistake. I picked up something, I think. Unless it's an American. Maybe the Americans spell grey and grey the same way. The personal grey and also the colour grey, they spell it the same way. I don't know. Anyway, because of the added humus and burned organic matter, no comparative tests were made in this study of the chemical characteristics of the burned and unburned soil. Now that's a little bit of a failing, I would have to suggest. No comparison of burned, because they did actually set up some trial plots of burned and unburned areas. So they should have also done a chemical analysis of burned and unburned sites. That's a little bit of a failing there. On the fact that they actually set up some burnt and unburnt trials, you see, so they should have actually done chemical analysis of burnt and unburnt areas, sort of thing. Okay, available information is rather contradictory, but most of the evidence indicates that burning decreases the acidity. In other words, it gets less acid, I would say, and increases nitrogen, replaceable calcium, and organic matter. The soils tested had all been burned recently, and thus, if generalization is true for burned, uncultivated soils, then the unburned soil must contain an even lower proportion of nutrients, which may possibly contribute to the disappearance of diarrhea from unburned air. Well, I think it's the other way around, fellas, but anyway, that's your point of view from nearly 70, well, 65, 65 years ago, roughly, nearly. Okay, so this comparative studies of burned and blah blah blah, pine, moisture content decreased at the upper 2 inches, burned soil, peaty soil, sorry. The peaty soil surface around the edges of a pocosin, because of its higher water holding capacity, probably is less affected by fire and thus it contains less burned materials. So in other words, there's less charcoal and ash on the pocosin end of the thing, but there's more on the upper end, or the savanna end. Okay, interesting. But then things always under gravity flow down towards the pocosin, I would think. But then again, it's a bog on the hill, so is that true? Yeah. Anyway, that's the end of this Dicktales. So there's lots to chew over there in only a short space, and this paper is about, I don't know, what is it, 25, 35 pages long, I think? I don't know. But yeah, these size pages anyway. I think, don't quote me on that. It's been a while since I've read it many times over, but and at different rates and in different styles. And one stage I went through reading just one word at a time. That took a long time. Okay, over and out for now. But it was well worth it. Picked up a few points. And we've just picked up that one, the misspelling of grey, unless it's an American way of, you spell both the personal grey and also the colour grey, the illustrative grey, the same way in America, whereas in European countries we don't. We have two spellings, the G-R-A-Y and the G-R-E-Y. So differences of culture, or it could be a spelling mistake, or a grammatical mistake as well. I don't know. Okay, over and out.